Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Drummond, and today I've got a special guest with me. You guys have seen her before. It's my little sister, Dana.
Hello.
So today I want to talk about a topic that several YouTubers have touched on, and that is mental health. And a lot of people have commented on my videos saying that they wanted to talk to me about mental health things, and for me, it's not something that I have a lot of experience on, and it's something that I'm not an expert on. So in this video, it's just going to be us talking about mental health and the things that we've dealt with. And my sister Dana has dealt with several different things, and she wanted to kind of open up. She's thinking about starting her own YouTube channel. She's got other social medias that you can follow her on. I'll leave those down in the links below so you can check those out. And make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel and check out my other social medias as well. So one of the reasons I started my YouTube channel was because I had a lot of people that I was trying to help. And when it came to helping people, I was just surrounded by so many different people, and it was really draining to try to help large numbers of people. So one of my friends that actually committed suicide, he had mentioned that my YouTube channel that I had deleted was very helpful to him. And I was just like, oh, I feel like maybe if I created another YouTube channel, I could be a little bit safer and share a little bit less information about where I live so that people don't show up. And I wanted to create this channel where people could kind of feel like they were here and they were accepted and they were loved for everything that they are, not just the things that society says is a capable thing of being loved for. One of the things I've never really touched on is mental health, just because I'm not a professional. I didn't feel like I was the person that should be making videos about mental health, but there's a lot of other YouTubers out there. Joey Kidney is one of the ones that I've watched that I really love his videos on mental health. And there's so many other ones, and I'll leave some of those in the comment section below as well for you guys to check out, just because I feel like they are so much better at this than I am. But Dana has experienced a lot of different things, and she's gone through a very long journey about finding herself. So we just wanted to kind of talk about that with her so that you guys could maybe relate to her, and maybe if you are dealing with someone in your life who you care for a lot and you want to understand them a little bit more, because I know that the journey that Dana's been on has been a rough one for her, as well as everyone who was involved that loved her. So I wanted to kind of touch on some of those things. We can kind of talk about it on my side of things, her side of things, so that you guys can kind of hear both sides of the story. So let's get started.
Hello, my name is Dana. I am Drummond's little sister. I'm 21. I go to Christopher Newport University. I'm going to be a senior this year. So big decisions have to be made very soon. So I'm in the middle of all of that. But as he was saying before, I have experienced a lot of mental health issues due to the things that I went through growing up, as well as the wiring in my head being a little off center. So a lot of the experiences that I have had have been affected by that, and I have heard a lot of people that have been in loving relationships with me, including family and friends. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And that's pretty much all about me.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about in today's video was just the fact that there are so many people out there suffering with different mental health issues, that there's a lot of us that don't suffer with them or suffer a little bit more mildly than some others. And I feel like as a family member of someone who is going through mental health issues, I feel like for me, something that I struggled with was, how can I be there to help? And you also struggle with the stuff of like, oh my gosh, am I doing enough? Am I doing something wrong? And I feel like a lot of people that I've talked to that have a lot of different mental health issues that they're dealing with, is a lot of times it's not something that the people that love them are doing wrong. It's something that it's just, you have to be able to communicate. And for me, it was something that was hard for me to communicate with you just because you were so young. And we also dealt with the fact that we were very distant for a long time due to me going to college, our parents divorcing, all of that fun stuff. So it kind of separated us, and we got back together after, I would say, probably 10 years. So we were separated for about 10 years. So that was a long time. It wasn't until Dana got to college that I felt like she was at the point where I could talk to her and I wasn't going to like push her off the edge, which is something that you're scared of doing because you don't really understand it every single video I ever watched was like, be careful, and then people are like, show love, don't show love, push, don't push. So it's something that it's just, you hear both sides, and it's really about communicating. And one thing that Dana did was she actually gave a speech in front of her classmates at Christopher Newport, and she sent me that video, and it kind of opened up about some things that she hadn't really talked to me about yet. And I was just like, wow, that was a really powerful speech. So I guess what I want to talk to you about is just like the things that you think as a child affected where you are now, and the things that are happening around you now that have kind of helped you kind of pull yourself back to a center. So if you wanted to kind of touch on some of those subjects.
Yeah. Ever since I was really little, a lot of people have said that I matured very quickly, and I feel like one of the reasons why is because our parents did divorce very early. I was 3, and you and Jennifer were so much older than me that I had that connection with you two, that I felt like I was older because of the situations that we were put through. So even at a young age, we were like joking. My mom and I were really super close, so anything that was happening with the courts or anything, she told me a lot about. So I feel like I was forced to grow up a lot faster than I thought, because I didn't have that secure attachment with either my dad or my mom. And they would both talk so illy of each other that I thought that I was the one holding the whole family together between you, Jennifer, Mama, and Daddy. So that was very hard for me at such a young age to feel like I was that crucial role and had to step up and be that person to hold the entire family together. So I feel like that's one of the things that caused the anxiety at the beginning, is just because I felt like if I made any wrong move or any wrong turn, that the whole family was gonna fall apart. So that was a lot. It was really hard when you and Jennifer first left to come live at the farm when I was with Mama, because she has a whole array of mental health issues on her own, but I was glued to her hip, and I was very oblivious of that, and I thought she was my idol for a very long time in my life, just because she was the one who cared for me and was supportive and loved me and vocalized that. And our dad doesn't vocalize that hardly at all, but he expresses it in other ways. But the hardest thing in my life was when my dad had custody of me and actually chose to keep me at the farm. And then I moved to Charlottesville with my stepmom and my dad right before my 5th grade year. So from my 5th grade year all the way up to my senior year of high school, I lived in the house with them too. And the relationship that I had with them is not exactly happy or supportive. So I was completely alone from the crucial time period of when I was like 10 all the way till 18. So all the decisions that I made, I felt like I didn't have any support coming from any angles, and that's not anybody else's fault. Like, you weren't in the state, I couldn't easily reach out to you, and Mama was like an hour and a half away, I couldn't drive. So I got to see my mom every other weekend, and then every time my dad would come pick me up, I would cry for the entire car ride home. And I'm guessing that made him feel pretty bad, but then again, I never asked how he was feeling about it. But I feel that nature versus nurture is a really big debate within science and psychology right now, which I'm studying, by the way, trying to figure out my messed up past and see how that can help other people. So the transition from little kid me to teenager me to adult me has gone through a lot of self-actualization, because I felt that I was on this journey alone and that I couldn't be vulnerable with anybody else to tell them that I did need help, because when I thought I needed help, I reached out and then nobody grabbed me to pull me up, so I was drowning for a very long time. So I came up with my own coping mechanisms that kept me from committing suicide, and I thought they were very positive measures because I wasn't killing myself, but it turns out that they are very negative, very not healthy, which included cutting. And I used that for a very long time to ease my anxiety as well as my depression, because I thought that by doing that, it was so much better than committing suicide, because whenever I was on the edge of wanting to do anything like that, I was like, you have family, you have people that care about you, you can't do that to them. But one of the hardest realizations that I've finally come to realize is that I'm going to keep doing all of those things and keep going to the brink until I realize that they're unhealthy and I don't want to do those things because I don't want to. I was talking to one of the people at CNU, and there was actually like a suicide discussion group that I went to, not because I was suicidal at the time, but because one of my friends committed suicide my freshman year of college, excuse me. But it was really hard to talk to them, and one of the things they said is that you can't blame yourself for that person committing suicide because it is an individual decision, and they made it sound not as negative as it was, but you need to realize that it's that person's decision and they're not doing it because of you, and it's not for any reason your fault, which is a little confusing.
When it comes to, because I've also been on the side of dealing with, I was dating someone who tried to commit suicide, and when he did that, his friend took him into the hospital, and I didn't know what had happened. His car wasn't at his house, he wasn't at work, he wasn't picking up my phone calls because they had put him in the hospital for a week on suicide watch so that they could help him. I had just left his house that morning to go to work, and everything seemed normal. And then my friend, who actually was successful at committing suicide, he had just talked to me and wished me happy birthday like that week right before it had happened. And when it came to like my side of things, like your brain just goes to like, oh my gosh, why didn't I notice this? Oh my gosh. And then you start thinking everything that you've talked about, and you're like, oh my gosh, I should have noticed that they were talking about this, because for me, my boyfriend at the time was struggling with being a gay Christian, and that's one thing that I talk a lot about on my YouTube channel. And we had taken a ride to Harrisonburg to meet my lesbian roommates that I had had up there. And the entire time he was like asking me like, how do you accept yourself? Like, why don't you think God hates you? And he was just like asking all these questions, and I was just like trying to give my best answers. But like after I found out that he had cut himself and was trying to end his life, like my brain was just like, oh my gosh, that was him reaching out. That was him trying to like find that answer, and I feel like I did a really bad job. And when my friend that was successful killed himself and I found out about that, I was just like, oh my gosh, he called me and wished me a happy birthday and asked me how I was doing, and I was just like, I didn't ask him how he was doing. And you just really put yourself through guilt that it's just like really scary to think. And we hear about celebrities that have killed themselves in the news a lot, and people talk about like, I should have known, but this person seemed extremely happy. And for someone who doesn't really experience suicidal thoughts, like for me, I have like dealt with really hateful people, and in my brain I think like, wow, that person would feel really guilty if I killed myself after what they said, because I do believe that you can be someone's light and you never know how dark someone's life is. So I go through life trying to be everyone's light, and I try not to be that negative person, because I never want to be that person that makes a joke about killing yourself or says something really hateful to someone just to find out that they were right on the edge and I was the one who pushed them. So for me, like my YouTube channel, I'm always trying to be that light, be that positive person, be that like laugh that people can have. And for me, like it hits really close to home when you find out that someone you really care about, like your sister or your boyfriend or your mom, is at that point where they're really sad and they just are dealing with so much that they just don't feel like it's worth trying anymore. I've dealt with depression. I've dealt with normal depression where like my granddad passed away. So that's a normal depression. Everyone gets sad when they lose someone in their life. And it took me a really long time to pull myself out of that, just because it was like a cycle. So I became depressed. I didn't sleep as much because I was just thinking so much about it. I can be fully functional, but like that's my way of removing myself from depression. Instead of dealing with depression, I'm like constantly doing things. So for me, it's I'm doing YouTube, I'm doing all these different things at work. I'm throwing myself into 1,000 different projects. I do my life coaching stuff. So for me, like, I never give myself time to think on those negative thoughts. And I always try to like pull positivity from like reading life coaching books, reading positive things, surrounding myself with friends. So I feel like for me, like, I removed that space for depression because, like, for me, I definitely have dealt with depression. And when I came out of it, I was just like, I never want to go back there. And so for me, I don't believe it's a chemical imbalance. I think it's just once I allow myself to fall into that, it becomes a dangerous place for me. But I feel like for Dana, it's more of there are things happening around her as well as a chemical imbalance that allows the things that are happening around her to kind of start to help her into that snowball effect. So for you, like, when it comes to those snowball effects, are there things that you can do to kind of pull yourself back, or is it just something that you have to like wait for the chemical imbalance to kind of balance itself out?
So for me specifically, everybody actually deals with depression very differently. If you go and talk to people, I have a lot of close friends that I've connected with just because we have this in common. Very other reasons why we're friends as well. But everybody experiences it differently. But specifically what I do the exact same thing you do about trying to keep myself busy all the time. When I'm brushing my teeth in the morning, I listen to music so that my thoughts don't creep in. But then the thing that really got me was that it took me an hour or more to go to sleep every single night, because I would hold all of those thoughts back and distract myself so much that when I got into bed, it was like a weight just like was pressing down on me, and I couldn't think of anything else, and the thoughts would keep running over and over and over and over again. That like every bad thought that I had about myself, about anything that I had done, like just like looking at people and like, oh, what did they think about me? Like, what happened? Like, what did I do to hurt them? Even though there was nothing that I really did to hurt them. So in some cases, keeping myself busy was great, but then again, it had the side effect of me hurting myself more because I was getting a lot less sleep than I could have been. And then when I was busy all the time, that's when I finally realized that that's why I had so many like depressive episodes, is because I was keeping myself too busy that I would completely just shut down. And even if I had made plans with friends, had done anything, I just went back to my room, laid in my bed, didn't get up to answer my phone, and I just laid there like completely still and just couldn't move, just because I didn't want to move, and I just had to stay there because that's the only thing I could have done without breaking down. I'm also the positive light. Everybody's like so happy, and I feel like one of the reasons why I do that is because I know how it feels to be at your lowest low, and it sucks. So even just like if somebody's sad, I just make fun of myself. I'm just really bubbly, really out there, so that at least I can put a smile on their face, because you have no clue what somebody else is going through. Even if they are a really crappy customer, just somebody you pass and they glare at you, there's nothing specifically that you have control of other than how you perceive the situation, and actually like make sure that just try to put a positive spin on everything. Because for me specifically, if I start thinking like, oh my gosh, like what did I do to that person, it's a spiral effect, and I completely just shut down after that. So a lot of people that I have interacted with and become really close with that don't have the same experiences and don't have either like suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety, they believe that I'm overreacting in a bunch of situations, and that only makes me feel worse, because I'm doing everything I can to push all those feelings away to make other people feel comfortable. But I feel like one of the reasons why I'm so open about it now is because I don't care what people think. I'm gonna do the things that I can to make myself most comfortable in situations. And before, the reason why I self-harmed and like put myself away in my room is because that was the only thing that relieved me, because I didn't want to offend other people by telling them how much of a hard time I was having. So people would ask how I was, and I'd be like, great. I would be so happy at school. Nobody would have ever thought that if I pulled up my sleeve, there would be scars everywhere. If I actually told them how I was, I would scare them, because some of the thoughts that were racing through my head all throughout middle school and high school were terrifying, even for me to admit. So even before I got to college, I wouldn't admit to myself how sad I was. I wouldn't admit to myself how badly I didn't want to be there and make it to the end of the day. But I finally found people that asked how I was doing, and I was like, oh no, I'm great. They're like, no, but really, how are you doing? And then therefore I was able to backtrack and actually think about how I was doing, because all my relationships were so superficial that I could get away with pretending to be happy, and the only time I let the sadness seep in was when I was completely alone and could lay there and cry in my bed, or just lay there and have nobody text me, nobody do anything, because they had their own close group of friends, and then I was completely alone and wouldn't make attachments with anybody. So like even when I was talking to you, I was like, oh, I'm so great, I'm like having an amazing day, and then you'd be like, I love you, bye, and I'm like, okay, now I can actually feel how I want to feel and not tell anybody how sad I am. And I feel like that's because during that crucial period, living with my stepmom and dad from the age of like 10 to 18, I felt that the only way that I could push through was not showing how emotional I was, because my dad didn't really show emotion. So I thought that was the best way to get through all the things I was going through, is just to pretend that they weren't happening to me. So whenever I self-harmed myself, I would just wear really long sleeves for a really long time. And now that I have tattoos all over my arm, I've been able to cover up my scars with something beautiful, so that whenever I look down, I'm not reminded of all the times why I did that and when I was in that really bad place. But I have learned how to bring myself out of that situation. So not being home for too long, not going down to my room in the basement and just sitting there and being in the exact place where I self-harmed so many times, where I was crying myself to sleep all those nights, and just making sure not to surround myself with negative people that either cause me a lot of anxiety, make me super sad, or just overwhelmed and over aroused all the time. And just being able to vocalize that when I've reached my limit, I feel like that's one of the hardest things ever, is saying that, oh, my opinion is important. I need to be in a situation where I'm comfortable, and if I'm not uncomfortable, I'm gonna say something. Deep breathing also really helps. I didn't realize how much of a thing that deep breathing was. Everybody's like, just take a deep breath, calm down. Don't ever tell anybody to chill, ever, even if they don't have any of these issues. It just pisses people off. Rule number one. But I feel that deep breathing really does help. Little mantras like, I control my emotions, things like, you can make it through this day, your anxiety doesn't define you, things like that. They may seem silly and cliche, but they're really not. They can actually help. I crashed my car a couple of months ago, and that was one of the things that made me drop back down to a very depressed state. But coming back from that, I've learned that I need to ask for help. Simply just things like, I need a ride to go to the doctor's office. I need you to help me bring the groceries back to my room, because I can't lug like 50 pounds of groceries up to my room by myself with 2 arms. So I need help. So even asking for help for like the smallest things has pushed me into an uncomfortable zone, but now it's becoming more comfortable for me to be like, hey, like, I need your help, please help me with this. So that has pushed me to realize, like, people actually are able to help me with this. Like, they want to help me. And then by making those connections, I'm getting out of my room, I'm having more interactions with people, and I have been opening up a little bit more, not like fully like throwing up all my emotions and telling them my deepest and darkest secrets, because that's not something you should do either if you're not very close with people, because then that might scare them away. But just being able to breathe and say those things. But being in a car, I don't have control if somebody else is driving. So just like even being in the car with my sister or you, I'm not in control because I'm not driving, and you have to go wherever the driver brings you. So it's like, oh, like I need to go do this and this and this. So it was terrifying because I was trying to go to my mom's house the other day, and my sister was driving me, and she was like, oh, I have to take this detour. So I was like, and I couldn't, like my chest got really tight and I couldn't breathe. And then I sat there and I was like, it's okay. You're gonna get to your mom's house eventually. Give up this little amount of control. Things that you don't plan for don't like define you getting to your end goal. Like things are gonna come up. Hurdlers are gonna come up, and you have to get across that. But just like being in uncomfortable situations does help. Some people don't like realize what little things can set people off, just like not knowing what types of food your friends are gonna cook for you. Just like being able to tell somebody with anxiety ahead of time, like just like as much as you can tell them, be like, okay, like this is what we're having to dinner, this is who's gonna be there, helps so much just prepare me to go into a situation, because the smallest thing can set people off. You don't know what exactly somebody's triggers are, you don't know what has happened in the past to them to make them feel the way that they're feeling. So just being able to be completely honest and open about your feelings, and then hopefully respect the person, like the boundaries that they're setting, is very important. But I feel that just being able to put yourself out there is one of the best things that you can do, and just support yourself, because there are going to be people out there that do not respect all those boundaries that you're setting, and you just need to make the choice of, if you want them in your life, then you have to work harder to be able to explain why you're feeling the way you are, or you need to have the courage to cut them out of your life and surround yourself with more supportive people.
For me, like, I do life coaching, and I talk to a lot of people who don't have like mental illness problems because for me, if I deal with people who have a chemical imbalance to where like it's something that they need some medication prescribed, like I have to let them go. Like, I am not certified for that type of thing, but for me, like, I talk to people about triggers and kind of digging down and understanding why something triggers them. And you have to like kind of sit back and realize that the people around you aren't purposely doing anything for the most part. I would say most people in your life, if you think they're your friend, more likely they're your friend and they're not trying to do anything that's going to upset you. I feel like when it comes to having people in your life that do have like chemical imbalances, you do have to be a little bit more catering to them. But also, like, when it comes to life coaching, a lot of times I talk to people about things that they can do to help themselves, because a lot of times, even for me, like, there's things that like irritate me, and I know that it's going to irritate me, so I make sure that I set up tons of things around me that will dissolve that thing from happening for me. So for me, like, I know that going into work and dealing with customers that are just like ungrateful, angry, I know that that's something that pulls my mood down. So for me, like, before I go to work, I make sure that I'm listening to either a positive audiobook or really upbeat positive music, just because I need to be at the top of my game when I go into any situation so that I'm able to deal with negative people. And then for me, like, when it comes to traveling, I know that something that stresses me out is last minute things. So for me, like, I write down everything. So I know exactly what the flight number is. I know exactly where it is in the terminal before I get there. I know exactly what time I'm leaving. I know if there's construction on the road. Like, for me, I know that something like a delay on the road where I might be late getting to the airport, I try to give myself as much time as possible so that if anything bad happens, I'm able to not stress about getting somewhere late. So I feel like a lot of times it does come to knowing what triggers you and then setting up things around you to make sure that you can avoid as many triggers as possible. So I know that in your situation, like, not knowing what someone's cooking and being thrown into that, you could ask, hey, what are you guys cooking tonight? And that's a simple way of avoiding showing up somewhere and them having food that you can't eat, and then you become anxious because now you either have to eat it because you have to pretend like you like it, or you have to sit there and not eat it because it's something that you can't eat, and that can like trigger you. So an easy way to kind of set up that boundary is, hey, what are you guys making? I just don't like surprises. I don't like surprises either. It gives me anxiety. I've had tons of people do that, and it's a great idea. It's just not something that makes me happy. I try to be a go with the flow type person, but it does cause me anxiety. I would say that something that's been really helpful for a lot of people I'm working with is being able to share stuff. So for me, I try not to share anything on YouTube that I have not conquered yet, because I know that on YouTube, a lot of people say a lot of hateful things and they will disagree with you and say a lot of really hateful things. So for me, there's things that I've struggled with in the past that I've shared on YouTube now because it's something that I've sat there and spent a lot of time dissolving and finding what the root of the issue is, like what happened in my childhood that's made me feel this way. So for me, I do a lot of digging into who I am, just because there are a lot of things that stress me out, and there have been a lot of bad relationships that I've been in that have set things in my mind to where when new people that I'm talking to do these things, and it just instantly hits a trigger, and I'm just like, oh, nope, can't have that. And then I don't react right away. I just kind of hold it here to where when I do have my alone time, I can kind of sit there and I'm just process this. Was it really this person that did this, or are you reacting to this way because this person in your past did this? And another thing you kind of talked about was things that our parents have did when we were little, our mom sharing a lot of information about the divorce. That was something that I think we all struggled with, all three of us, because we were kids going through parents' divorce. And I mean, there's a lot of divorce counselors out there that tell the parents to not do that with their kids, because that will affect them later on in life, because they do feel responsible and they do kind of feel like they're holding in a lot of secrets. So for me, I also dealt with I felt like I was the oldest, and I felt like I had to pretend like a lot of things didn't affect me, and I had to be successful, be strong. And I feel like for me, that turned me into the life coaching type of person, because I felt like I had to be there for you or Jennifer. So I had to play the role of the strong person, play the role of the person that knew what he was doing. But for me, high school was a horrible experience. I had no clue what I was doing. I felt like I put on that act that I knew what I was doing. I was doing theater, joining Young Life, doing Amarecos, which is our show choir at our high school. And for me, I felt like the divorce and everything that happened as a child kind of pushed me into the life that I'm in now, where I'm doing things to help people like YouTube or life coaching or as a trainer. So that's the type of things that pushed me into who I am today. I definitely deal with a lot of stuff that you talk about dealing with, but for me, I process it a little bit different than you do. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I kind of wanted to talk to you about was, because I process things a certain way, when I give you advice, it's the advice that works for me. So when it comes to someone who does have a chemical imbalance, when we give you advice, I know a lot of times people will give people with depression or anxiety really shallow advice that comes off like we don't care, but we're giving you advice.
Just stop being sad. Why are you sad?
We give you the advice that would help us. Oh, just surround yourself with more people that are happy. That'll make you better. But when it comes to people who are dealing with a chemical imbalance, our advice comes off very uncaring and very shallow, because it's not that simple. It's not a simple fix. It's not something that you can just do. So what are some things that you would give advice for maybe a mom or dad, a brother or sister, boyfriend, girlfriend, of people who do suffer from a chemical imbalance? What are things that we can do that would help you more through that? Because I know you were talking about feeling like you had to keep it all in. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's the big issue for a lot of people, because when you start to tell people about your depression, when you start to tell people about your anxiety, you feel like you're turning those people off from wanting to be around you. Mm-hmm. So what are some things that we could do that would make people in those situations feel more comfortable with letting us know how they're really feeling? Because I feel like that's really important, because even in relationships with people, communication is the biggest thing that you want to have. Communication is key. No matter what, if you're in a fight, communicate. If you're dealing with mental illness, communicate. If you're dealing with things that from your past, communicate. It's the biggest thing, but I feel like a lot of times we do communication wrong. So what's the right way to communicate that would make you feel more comfortable to share and maybe keep you from ever feeling like you're on that edge?
Okay, so the first thing that I would say is just to let us talk. The hardest thing is actually getting up the courage to feel comfortable to talk. So making sure to be there for that person. Tell them how much you care about them, how much that you love them, and that you'll be there for them. If they need you, please like reach out. But once we open up, don't cut us off to give us advice to how to fix the problem. We're not telling you that we're broken and we want you to fix us. So that's one of the most frustrating things, and that's another reason why I completely just shut off and stopped telling people anything, is because the first time I opened up to somebody, I was talking to them and I was like, I'm really sad, I'm going through this, and they're, oh, shh, this is what you should do to fix that. And I was like, no, just let me get through the story. I want to try to explain to you how I'm feeling, because I know you don't understand, because you don't have these thoughts that make like everything seem negative and make the sun go away and clouds and rain come. So it's just very important to know that if we're telling you these things, then you need to take that very seriously and listen very closely so that we can try to communicate as much as we can to show you how we're feeling. Because now that I've gotten to the point where I feel comfortable sitting silently, going through the process of trying to realize why I'm feeling the way that I am and how to get out of that position myself and actually reach out for help, that's very hard to do. And for the longest time, I didn't do that. And I know there's a lot of people struggling that don't. That's why people who are very suicidal and actually commit suicide, none of their friends know, and they're like, oh, they were so happy, why didn't they tell me? It's because we don't want to share how badly we're feeling, and we think that people won't be able to help us, because every single time that we try to tell people how we're feeling, they're just, oh, you should do this, try this, and we're like, no, please just listen to what we're saying. So I feel like that's very important, just to let people know that we don't want advice. We don't want you to tell us to go talk to a counselor because we're so fucked up. We understand that about ourselves, and we're trying to have people understand us at least to a level that we feel comfortable sharing, and don't tell us to open up to you when we're not ready. A lot of trust goes into actually trying to explain and trust that you won't tell other people. If somebody opens up to you, don't go blabbing your mouth to other people, because if something comes out of somebody else's mouth, are you okay? Because I heard this happened to you. I heard that you were cutting again. Are you okay? That means that the trust that I had with the person that I told, or anybody told, is completely broken, because if we don't have the initial trust that you're going to keep everything that we're saying a secret, then why would I share anything with you? And that further makes barriers around myself, because now I feel like I'm blocked in and can't share anything with you anymore, because I don't feel comfortable telling you things now that other people are knowing. And that connection with people is very important. Some people don't like touch. I know that my main love language is touch, so hugs are very important to me. I like physical touch because I feel like that warmth from other people makes me feel better, and a lot of my friends know that, but some people don't like that. So that's just a personal thing. If you see me and I look sad, hug me. But just realize that if you see self-harm scars on somebody, don't point them out, don't glare at them. I just shared an article on Facebook a couple of days ago, and people shouldn't be ashamed to show self-harm scars. That's not one of the reasons why I chose to put tattoos over them. But people are so uncomfortable with their own skin, but just realize that they were in a place in their lives where they felt they had to do that. Don't automatically think that people are doing it for attention, and just be supportive of them. Ask them how they're doing. Don't be like, what's that? What's that from? Oh, what happened? So many people have done that to me, and I'm just like, oh, I'll talk about it later. And then it just reminds me of the terrible state that I was in when I did that. One of the main things is also not blaming yourself for not being there for me during that difficult time, or anybody in these cases, because everybody has to go through their own things alone to be able to understand them and grow as a person. But always reach out and ask them how they're doing. There's nothing that you could have done in the past. You can't blame yourself from what happened in the past. Just be in the current moment, live in the present, and just make sure that the people you love and care about know that you're there for them, because that's one of the main things that everybody does, is that they're beating themselves up, I wasn't there for you, no, and then they go away again because they're mad at themselves. But then that only makes us feel worse, because a couple of times when I self-harm, it's because it's a reoccurring thing. You can't just decide to stop and be like, I'm never gonna do it again. Even though I made promises to people that I really cared about because they were personally affected and thought it was their fault when I did that. I made a bunch of promises and then I broke them. And then I had to open up and tell the people that I cared about that I relapsed, and then I did it again. And then they got really sad and got angry at themselves because they weren't there for me. But that only made me feel worse because then I therefore let them down again. And therefore I hated myself even more for doing these things. And even though, I don't know if it's a chemical imbalance or just everybody has a little voice in their head, but even when I'm in the manic happy stages, like having a great day around a lot of people, I'm super happy, there's always a little voice in the back of my head like, no, you're not happy. You want to be sad. You want to go back and lay in your bed all day. And like even going and talking to a therapist, when I finally gained up the courage and the ability to go and talk to somebody about my problems. At CNU, they have a counseling center. And I just went in, and then I faked being happy in front of her, so she thought I was getting better. And then I was talking to one of my friends, and she was like, but that's not helping you. Why would you go and spend all this time there, take time out of your week from studying to go talk to somebody if you're not helping yourself? So I feel that one of my main problems is pretending to be okay in front of other people. And when you do that, it's not helping you or bettering yourself. So rather than pretending to put on this happy facade in front of everybody, you just need to be real with people and very authentic, because if you're not authentic, people who don't understand everything you're going through are just going to automatically think you're okay. But it also leaves room for when you're having a really super bad day, people don't come up to you and they're like, oh my gosh, you look sick, you look awful, what's wrong? And it's like, oh, like I'm just like showing you who I really am, like why are you freaking out? And then that makes you feel even worse for being sad too. So it's just being authentic. And if you really don't care, just don't ask how we're doing. Because if I open up to you and you're like, oh, like, how are you? And I answer truthfully, and then you're like, and then you leave, like that makes me feel bad because I therefore opened up to somebody who didn't really care. And then that made me feel worse because I made them feel uncomfortable. So be authentic, ask us how we are, and when we say great, be like, really? Are you sure? If you're sure, you want to hear the right answer. So if you want to hear the truthful answer, then ask us how we're doing. Make sure to support us, be there for us. Don't interrupt and give advice unless we ask for it.
And when you were talking about being authentic, I made a video on my channel talking about being authentic just because when it came to me in general, I feel like I became a much happier person once I could be just authentic. And it was really nice. Like for me, I came out of the closet when I was 19 years old. So that was like a huge weight lifted off of my shoulders. Like being able to tell the world who I was most definitely a place where I was just like, wow, I am able to be myself and I don't have to hide anything. But then I started realizing that there was other things that I was ashamed of that I was hiding. And I feel like when you're in a situation where you're hiding a part of yourself, you're never able to believe someone loves you fully, because you're like, if they found out about this or if they knew about this part of me, they wouldn't love me. So if you're not able to be 100% open with someone, you're never going to be able to 100% believe that that person loves you for everything that you are, because if you're not sharing it all, then they don't know everything about you. So therefore, you've always got that little voice in your head where you're like, I bet they wouldn't like me if they knew this. And there was a lot of times where I was at like a current job and dealing with customers, and they were telling me how much they loved me and they thought I was so amazing. And like in the back of my head, I was like, I bet if they knew I was gay, they wouldn't like me. They wouldn't be offering me this job. So I got to the point where I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna say it, because I don't want to live with the thoughts in the back of my head filling me with self-doubt. So I just started opening up, and I was just like, this is who I am. And for me, like when I started applying for jobs, I was just like, I'm gay. I just put it out there. And when I was having shitty days, I was just like, I'm having a shitty day. I didn't go into work after Matt broke up with me and pretend like I was having a good day. For customers, yes. because at a customer sales associate level, it doesn't matter. Put on a fake smile. You're not talking to customers about, but when it comes to coworkers, like if you're having a shitty day, like letting them know that, hey, I just got broken up with, or hey, I just dealt with this, or hey, I was almost in an accident and it's giving me really bad anxiety and I'm still a little bit shooken up from it. Being able to talk about those types of things really allows the people around you to kind of react a little differently. I know that in my relationships in the past, my boyfriends had a real hard time communicating with me. I don't know if it was because of who I was, because of my confidence level, it kind of shut some people down, but it came to the point where my boyfriends were acting a certain way and they wouldn't tell me what was going on. So I just created this story in my head of why they were doing that. And because they weren't giving me all the pieces of the puzzle, I was getting frustrated. My friends were asking questions. I didn't have the answers to them. My boyfriend wasn't giving the answers. I wasn't able to give the answers. So it created like this really bad atmosphere to where my boyfriends got put in an awkward situation because people thought they were being assholes or doing something wrong. And like Matt, he had a headache, and he said that he was too embarrassed to tell us that he had a headache because he didn't want to seem like he was going to let us down because we were at a concert. The concert was very loud. Matt ended up just walking out. He didn't tell us why. He just walked out and left for a very long time. So for me and my friends, we were just like, wow, that's extremely rude. And the whole situation was he was being an asshole. But had he just been like, I have a really bad headache, I'm going to need to leave, we would have been like, oh wow, do you want us, like Sarah actually had ibuprofen in her car. I had the keys to my car. I could have easily given them to him so he could have gone home and got medicine or gone to a store and got medicine. But in that situation, there was no communication, so it just like kind of snowballed effect into a very negative like experience. So for when it comes to like situations and people opening up and sharing things, it is really important for people in all situations, because everything that you're going through, there is something that the person that you're around is also going through. So the less that's shared, the more that's happening. And I feel like there are times where someone might be going through something really hard, so is this person. The way that this person's reacting is affecting this person. So it's really just like a snowball effect of the way we all affect each other. So for me, I've always just learned that opening up, and for me, YouTube has been amazing because I've opened up about things that I was a little bit more nervous about, like being sexually harassed as a kid. Like that was something I held in for a really long time. And for the longest time, I thought I was going to hell because of that. I felt like I was a horrible person, that I did this to myself. And that was something that really built up inside of me. And then when I was able to kind of share that, and other people started opening up to me about their own stories, and then I heard that there were people that are thinking just like me, I was just like, wow, like I'm not alone. Wow, my story has inspired this person. Wow, my friends actually do care. Wow, people around me stopped making jokes about raping people. So it's really, the more you're able to open up and trust the world, and yes, doing that sometimes you do kind of get hit really hard. There are hateful people out there, but for the most part, the people that you've surrounded yourself that love you do care enough to try to manipulate the way that they do things around you to make sure that you're more comfortable. So a lot of times we don't share things because we're afraid that it's going to affect other people in a negative way. And instead, we're able to share those things and create a more positive energy around the whole situation, which really pulls us away from feeling extremely alone and feeling like it's all our fault or it's our responsibility to solve the entire world's problems, because I feel like a lot of people believe that no one will care or we'll be putting too much on someone's plate. And there have been times where I've put too much on people's plate and they will pull away. But it's the way I always put it in my head is they've probably got a lot on their plate already, and I just overloaded their plate, and I need to give them some time to process it or eat some off their plate or dump a little in the trash. But I feel like when it comes to mental health, it's just, we need more people talking about it. I feel like YouTube is an amazing platform for that. I think that there needs to be a lot more books written by people that are younger and less so on the professional side, because I think it's really important. I know I just read a book called A Little Life, which I just gave to her to read, but it really opened my eyes to the way people process things. And in that book, you can see how everyone around him in his later life really loves him as a person. And it's the people from his like early childhood that really affected the way he thought of himself for the rest of his life. And a lot of times you're just like, oh my gosh, he's hurting himself, and the people are too scared to say something, or too scared to ask, or too scared to like communicate with anyone else because he's asked them not to share anything. And you see how everyone in his life has small pieces of the puzzle, and none of them share with each other because he asked them not to. Some of them did, and some of them made comments that really pushed him further back into the closet of not coming out, but sharing his mental health with people. Being positive is very important. Always just kind of being that light for people. And if you're in a situation where you can't be someone's light, don't be that darkness in their life. Like, pull yourself away from the situation. Be like, you know what? I'm not in a good place mentally right now, and I don't want to hurt you more by saying anything. So I'm going to pull myself out right now and kind of deal with this. But you have to tell them that.
Yes.
You can't just be like, oh my gosh, and then pull away, because once you do that, then
we don't trust you anymore.
they're sitting there, they're creating their own negative experience in their head, being, oh my God, I went too far. Oh my God, I can't talk to anybody. I shouldn't have shared anything. I should have kept it to myself. And then they pull themselves back in to a dark spot where they feel like they can't share with people. It is important to get people to communicate. It is important to not pull away without explaining why. And when you're explaining it, don't make them feel bad for sharing ever, because that will prevent them from ever sharing with someone who might be able to help them later.
Yeah. One of the main things that I really think is important is that everybody's well-being is very important. Just because some people have mental health disorders, some people don't, the illness doesn't matter. Everybody is going through something, and every single person's well-being is very, very important. Don't put anybody's mental health above your own. Communicate, like Drummond was saying. It's very interesting to see the divide between the people who are too scared to say anything from the mental health side because they don't want to offend anybody, and then also the people on the other side who are trying to be caretakers of the people with mental illnesses, not speaking their mind just to not throw the person off the edge. That doesn't help anybody because the communication isn't clear. From my side, if I'm doing something to hurt somebody, but they just don't want to offend me and make me worse, that's hurting the other person way more. And then that's therefore hurting us as well. Because if there's no clear communication, then we're gonna keep doing everything we do to help ourselves survive. Because in that moment when I am super sad, I don't feel anything. I know other people don't experience this, but I go completely numb. I don't care about anything. If you push me too hard, I'll tell you exactly how I'm feeling. And it can be really blunt and it can hurt people's feelings. But once I'm out of that state, like if I said anything, like I want you to tell me if I offended you so that I can take that into consideration and then not hurt you in the future. If I do something or say something that really affects you, don't play it off to make me feel better and act, like not make me feel worse if I did something to offend you. Flat out say it, be like, hey, like when you did this, you hurt me. Or like, I really didn't like when you did this, like it affected me this way. Because when there's that clear line of communication, both of us are being completely open and honest with each other. So then therefore, when I'm in a negative state or about to be in a very negative state, I feel comfortable enough saying like, hey, can you help me? Like, please help me. That enforces the trust that you're both being open with each other. Because when there's a strict divide, like if I'm telling you everything that's going on in my life and like how I'm feeling, how you're making me feel, but then you're not telling me how you feel, it's very hard to make that connection and bridge that gap, because it's not clear on both sides, because then it seems like I'm being very selfish because I'm doing literally everything I can to survive and to get out of my bed. But then you're playing off everything that's offending you. So then when people blow up on us because they don't want to hurt us, that makes us feel even worse, because for this long extended amount of time we've been doing everything that we feel is right, but then we find out that something has happened like way back, like years, months, weeks, that has happened that offended them, but then it's been building up for this entire time. So just like me, like not trying to hold all of my emotions in, and then I end up hurting myself. Like people cannot hold any emotion in without it exploding at some point. And explosions are not good in any sense. The eye of the hurricane is a very small place, and the second you step out of the center of that, everything's chaos. So just being able to talk about mental illnesses, even if you don't have a mental illness, being able to talk about your fears, something you're scared about, something that you're really anxious for, so that people can be there for you as well. People who don't have mental illnesses still do experience a lot of hard things, and just because they don't have mental illnesses, some people just like slide into the side and they're like, well, you're okay, like you're gonna get through it, like you got it, champ, like just like the wind is hard right now, but you're gonna get through it, you can push through, like you don't have a disorder, like you'll be fine. That's not true. It's very important to be there for people whose mind doesn't have misfiring of synapses and everything like that. Like that doesn't matter. I feel like genuine care for people, even if there's nothing chemically or mentally, no, I don't want to say wrong with them, but just like something that isn't completely right, so they're not healthy in mind, body, physical, emotionally. Like it's hard for everybody. Everybody has really hard days, and we said that earlier, like be the light in somebody's darkness, like anybody's day. And I feel like that's really important, and people don't realize how much a little like simple smile will do.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like the imbalance in people's brains, it's really just where their brain goes when certain things happen, because like she said, lots of bad things happen to everybody. Like we all deal with it in different ways. So I feel like it's really just trying to come to an understanding of how far is too far, what is off center and what's center. So like everyone experiences things differently. I know when I experienced the DC thing at the parade this year, like my brain was just like thinking about all the people that this was their first parade, this is the experience that they're getting, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And like my brain didn't really think so much about like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get shot. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And my brain went out to thinking about everyone else's experience. And other people were in a situation where it was life or death. They were just like freaking out and panicking. And after that, how we all dealt with it is going to be very different. I know for me, like I went and talked to a counselor just because my brain went to the negative area where I was just like, oh my gosh, I hate people. And it wasn't, I hated the people that were at the parade. I hated people that have done all the horrible things in the past, that have made it to where a glitter bomb can go off and someone screams gun and thousands of people start running. Like that's the world we live in now. So for me, it's just like where your brain goes. Like for a lot of people, they can go through hard times, but they can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So some people can really focus on that light and just run towards that light and get out of the hard times. There's some people who go through hard times, and instead of focusing on the light at the end of the tunnel, they start to look at everything that's going around them and focusing on all the things that are just going wrong. So they're like, oh my gosh, this is wrong. Oh my God, this is wrong. And they're not able to kind of think of the things that they can do to fix it. And they don't have a goal on how to get out of it. They're just panicking and focusing on anything that's like right in front of them. And I feel like that might be where the chemical imbalance is what your brain forces you to focus on, and how your brain doesn't allow you to unfocus and refocus on what could be the solution for the problem that you're going through. So I feel like a lot of people, when it comes to dealing with issues, when you say all of us deal with issues, there's a set like tunnel that you can walk through. Sometimes you're in a situation where you don't see the light yet, but it's what you choose to focus on. So for me, I pull internally and I go, I need to be strong. I need to get through this. I'm just going to have to allow myself to get through this. I don't know the solution yet. Like for me, I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And that for me was very stressful, and I panicked a lot about that. And I allowed other people to tell me what they thought was the direction I needed to go. And for a while, I kind of rode on them, and I was just like allowing them to pull me through the chaos. And then I realized that I needed to get off of that train because where they were going was not where I wanted to go. So a lot of times it's really about how we are able to focus on different things and get ourselves out of it. From experience, I've learned that I've had to realize what I want. So when you're younger, you don't really know what you really want. So as I got older, I was like, okay, now let's take the small parts of everything that I've done and figure out what I like about that. So in jobs, I really liked coaching new people. So I really got a lot of pleasure out of helping new people learn how to do their jobs. In school, I didn't really like architecture. I really loved the freshman counseling aspect of it. I really liked being in the honors program and helping the honor people set up stuff. I loved being part of the architecture club because I was able to be creative, because I was like doing cool things with like Photoshop, and I was just like, wow. So I really sat there, and instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know what I am going to do with my life, and I was like, I went through school for architecture, but I had no power and no sense in wanting to do architecture. I started to kind of pull the small pieces until I was able to kind of start to create a rope to pull myself in the direction that I wanted to go in life. And that's when I kind of had to sit down with my friends. I was just like, here's everything that I like. And we just kind of sat there and pulled it all together, and they're like, life coaching. Because I was able to like pull myself together enough to kind of be a role model for you and Jennifer, I was able to do that for myself. And even though crazy things do happen, I learned how to kind of pull myself together and kind of put the pieces together slowly and block out everything else that was very chaotic at the time. So for me, that was something that pulled me towards the light that I'm at now, because I am working a job that I absolutely love. I'm doing YouTube, which I absolutely love. The opportunities that have come into my life because of my YouTube channel, I'm just extremely blessed with, because never in a million years did I think that a casting director would reach out to me and ask me to be a part of a project. And that's phenomenal for me. So I think it's all about finding the small things and piecing it together slowly and finding that focus so that you're not like looking around. Because I feel like anyone can push themselves into a situation. Because our mom dealt with mental illness, that's something that I've always worried about for myself. Like I've always been worried that if I stress myself out too much, that I might crack and that I might push myself off that edge, just because I know it does run in the family and I know that it is something that could happen. I know I've had people in my life, like boyfriends, when I've said things that might be a little bit off the wall, they're like, you're crazy. And I would become so offended because I know that that is something that is possible. I wouldn't say crazy, I would say mentally unstable or chemically unbalanced. But when people said crazy, that's instantly I would get so angry with them, because that is something that is possible and it's not something I ever want to do. So I focus so hard on keeping myself centered. So when people throw that out there and call me crazy, it really just like knocks me off my rocker and just makes me so upset.
I feel like just being able to be comfortable in your skin is a point that everybody should at least set as a goal. I have like altered my appearance in the sense of hair colors, tattoos. Bless you. Is that a sneeze?
Cough.
Oh, it's a cough, okay. But just changing my appearance, altering it in a way that I feel most comfortable in, is a thing that I feel like people should be able to have the opportunity to do, to mess around, to try to do different things. And just being able to look in the mirror and feel absolutely comfortable looking at yourself. Painting a picture of yourself and thinking like, in the future, this is what I want to be. I want to be able to be comfortable with my weight, my appearance, and then setting goals like, what do I have to do to be able to reach the person that I want to be in the future? And kind of like Ben did, just being able to find a supportive group of people who are willing to help you through that time is really important. But some self-reflection is definitely needed within that period of looking back and saying, okay, this is where I was however many years ago, and I've gotten to this point. And have a little positive aspect, be like, look at what I did, like give myself a little smiley face sticker or golden star, like I made it through that really hard time. And just be able to look back and see all the accomplishments you have made and not focus on the failures. Because when you're in that moment of searching for something, if you automatically think about all the negatives, it's a spiral into all the negatives that have happened in your past, and then you just lay there like I used to and just be like, well, I'm never going to be anything because of all these negative things. When you're about to go into that negative area, you have to be like, wait, but the last time I felt like this, I got through it and I had people to help me, and I therefore will be able to do this better. And then the next time I feel like this, I'll have more positive opportunities to be even better, because rather than feeling that awful like cloud coming over you and then like submitting to it and then falling even deeper off the edge, you'll be able to say like, wait, I made the decision to think positively rather than succumbing to the really negative feelings. So I feel like being able to self-reflect and look into yourself and say, wait a second, like I know that it's hard right now, but there is something that shows that if I make the right actions and I take control of my feelings, that I can change my perspective on this situation and then have a better and more positive future by making the decision to do that myself. So I feel like that's one of the main things that people need to realize, is that once you're able to feel confident with yourself and your appearance, your head, everything like that, it's so much easier to catch yourself before you fall into that negative state, because you sense within yourself like, hey, like that person is saying something I don't agree with, or I'm doing something that I don't feel comfortable with. Like, why am I going out with these people if this is something that I don't want to do? And just finding the line between, why am I doing this to make other people happy, or am I doing it to make me happy? And then choosing the road to make yourself happy, because in the end, you'll find people that do the same things to make themselves happy, and then you can make yourself connected to the people that actually have the same values as you, and there's no reason for you to not speak your mind, because they'll value your opinion, whatever it is, and not judge you or back away or completely vanish from your life, because they'll value your opinion. And even if it's different from theirs, it's the ability to communicate and be accepting of their opinion even though it's different.
I think another thing that's really important is anchors. I think that another person should never be your anchor. I think that's dangerous, because you're putting someone in the position, and people are very unpredictable, and we are also never going to have a perfect life. So there's no perfect person out there. So if you ever put your happiness as an anchor to another person, it's possible you're just going to be like whipped around with their emotions as well. And I think that finding anchors around you in your life is really important. So like music, your career, things where it's not really driven by other people.
An emotional support animal.
Yeah, animals are great. So I would say like maybe if you're an artist, like your artwork would be an anchor. If you want to be able to like write in a journal or write a book, that can be an anchor. Something that pulls you back, that's something that you have 100% control of, because you will never have 100% control over another person. So therefore, that's always going to put you in a place where you feel anxious because you're unsure of something. So if you put anchors in your life where you are 100% sure this is going to happen. I know that I talked to someone who they did like write when they were anxious and depressed, and their computer died, and it sent them into like a crazy spiral because that was one of their anchors, and their computer was not there. And I was just like, in that moment, that was your anchor because you were already set off by something else and you were using that as an anchor. But had you not been in a situation where you were already in chaos, you would have been like, okay, I can start writing on a piece of paper. So having multiple anchors is probably a good idea, just because sometimes things go a little bit array and it's crazy and you just don't always have control over it. So creating multiple anchors to kind of pull yourself back in, having that safe place where you can go. Life is chaotic, it's unpredictable, so it's really just about creating anchors for yourself, getting rid of anything that could possibly cause issues, dissolving things that do cause issues. So just going into your past, kind of reflecting on that. What made me think this way? Why does this certain thing stress me out? Going back until you completely dissolve it so you have less things that are going to affect you. I think those are just really important things that you can work on by yourself, with a counselor, with someone that knows what they're talking about, just because talking to your friends, they're not professionals and you can't treat them as professionals. So you have to understand that their advice might not be the best. They're probably giving you their best advice that they can, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right advice. And another thing that I wanted to say is reading a book isn't always the best thing to take advice from, because the book is written for a broad audience and every single piece of advice that the book says doesn't necessarily work for your situation. A lot of times you have to read it and kind of manipulate it into your situation so that it can help you. Talking to a professional is a lot easier because they can kind of go off of what you've said, give their advice, you can give your feedback, then they can modify the advice to fit your life, to where it's modified around every situation that you have in your life. And that's where you being as open as possible is going to help, because we can only give advice for what we know. And if we are not in your body with your thoughts, there's no way we're going to be able to give you perfect advice. So don't be afraid to share with someone who's there to help, because it's their job to help and they can't help if they don't have all the pieces. Mm-hmm. And just like I was saying before, if I'm hiding things from people, there's no way that we can solve that problem. And you were talking about how you being the person sharing everything and that person hiding it, it's impossible for you to mentally assess the situation if you've only given your half and don't have the other half to kind of go off of. So when that other person does blow up at you, it destroys everything that you've just put out there. So just be open, communicate with the people that you care about, and try to be as positive as possible. Try to realize the things that set you off, the triggers that you run into. Set anchors, realize what triggers you, and then go from there.
Mm-hmm. Don't be defensive either. I feel like one of the main things that creates arguments within any friendship or relationship is not thoroughly hearing the other person's perspective. So communication also means not just talking, but listening. Speaking your mind is very easy, but hearing something that necessarily is against your view or that you've never experienced is one of the hardest things to swallow and actually take in. So being able to fully listen, so to listen actively, is by being able to clear your mind and just absorb rather than automatically making decisions. And if somebody says something that you don't believe in, or something that you've done that you see as right, and they say it, it's automatically just snapping at that person and defending yourself, rather than saying oh, I understand what you're saying. This is how I interpreted it. I understand how that hurt you and I apologize for that. But just not making the snap decision to defend yourself rather than listening to the person's perspective fully. I feel like that's very important to do, rather than cutting in, because that's the same thing as cutting in when somebody's opening up to you and giving them advice, rather than making their argument and how they were feeling mean nothing. It's just let them get through what they're saying and be like, I understand what you're saying. This is how I perceived it, and this is how we're going to work through it. By interrupting them, it's basically saying your opinion means nothing. How you were feeling means nothing to me. This is how I was feeling. That's superior. So just making sure to communicate and listen. Listening is very important within anything.
And I think you probably heard both of us say, I feel, a lot in this video.
I feel.
It's something that I've gotten pretty good at, just because when you're saying I feel, or this, when you've done this is how it made me feel, it's really important when you're communicating to talk about what they're doing and how it makes you feel instead of saying something like, you did this and that's wrong, because you're accusing them. And when it comes to stuff like that, it's just as important as the person that's dealing with all the anxiety and everything, as well as the person that is talking to them, to get everything that they're feeling out there. Because if the only person talking is the person with anxiety and depression, and you're not talking about your feelings as well, they don't know how to do anything correctly either to help you through their whole process. Because just because they are the one dealing with the imbalance doesn't mean that you're not also dealing with them and all the different emotions that they're going through. So you also are very important in that situation. So everyone's important in this situation. Don't feel like just because someone's sharing, hey, this is how you made me feel, that your feelings don't matter. Your feelings still matter. It's just there right now, it's their turn to explain to you how they're feeling, the things that you've done, and how it makes them feel. So after they're done talking, be like, okay, well, I didn't realize this is how I was making you feel. You saying that made me feel this way. And you can communicate that way without getting offended, because you're just talking about how you're feeling. You're not blaming them for anything. You're not saying that the way you made me feel is wrong. It's just talking about feelings. And a lot of times when I'm editing my videos, I realize that I say, I feel a lot. But it's just me doing that because I don't want to offend people, because my feelings are my feelings, and the way that the world makes me feel, there's nothing wrong with the way I feel. So that's why I always say that in my videos, and people have probably picked up on that. But that's the way to kind of word things to where you're not offending people. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. It looks like it's almost an hour and 30 minutes long now. After I edit it, it might be a little bit shorter, but probably won't, just because there's a lot of good things said. But if any of you guys feel like you have some comments that you want to leave, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. If you feel like Dana might be someone that you can connect with better, she does have an Instagram. She is putting a YouTube channel out. But I hope you guys are having a great week. Hopefully you got a lot from this video. Feel free to reach out to either of us, or reach out to any of the other YouTubers that I linked below. They have a little bit larger channels, so it's a little harder for them to talk to people, but we are both here if you want to talk, and we've got amazing connections to where we can point you in the right direction if you need that. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Check out her Snapchat, Instagram, and anything else I link below. I'll leave mine down there as well. And we will see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.